A writer by the name of Maud breaks into an inn and takes the key to a room. He is left with no choice but to yell at his wife and her lover Ted when he discovers that she is having an affair. Maud, distraught, spends 6 months in seclusion in a cabin, writing a book he never manages to finish. An unidentified named shooter visits Mort at his cabin one day and accuses him of stealing his story. Shooter tries to hand Mort the manuscript that would prove his denial. However, when the shooter departs, many do not listen and instead simply shut the door. His manuscript, The Sowing Season, was left behind, which Mort discovered. He disposes of the manuscript the following day after Mort disposes of it, convinced that he has never heard his story. Mort appears to be unable to move on from the book he is penning, which appears to be autobiographical. His housekeeper had left the manuscript on the table in the kitchen, and when he goes there, he finds it. I am now fascinated. Mort picks it up to read now. He finds out to his dismay that the shooter's manuscript is virtually identical to the current one. He pulls out his book and reads Secret Window, one of the stories, just to make sure there are similarities. Amy, his ex-wife, calls him up occasionally to see how he is doing. In response to Maud's inquiry, we learn that Mort purchased a house where Ted and she had been residing. Inferring that his jealousy of Ted persists, he says so. Maud feels remorse as she walks in the woods because this makes Amy angry and causes her to hang up the phone. Hurriedly, Maud asks Shutter if he has read the manuscript. As they go along, an elderly man called Greenleaf stops to wave. Another question for Shutter: when was the manuscript written? According to the man, it was 7 years ago. He couldn't have plagiarized, according to Maud, because his story had appeared in a mystery magazine 2 years prior. An enraged Shooter demands proof, but he has a copy of the magazine stashed away in his former residence. Mort is given 3 days by him to retrieve it from his wife. Mort explains his predicament to his dog, explaining that he doesn't want to bother his wife again for the magazine. After that, he gets some shut-eye and dreams that he's falling off a cliff. As he steps outside, he discovers a note from Shutter that serves as a deadline reminder. The note is written on a white cloth. Upon opening it, he finds his lifeless dog, stabbed multiple times with a screwdriver. Mort locks his doors and windows, expressing both anger and fear. Reporting the incident to the sheriff the following morning is his plan. But the cop plays down the murder by claiming he can't face charges for an animal killing. As a result, Maud contacts Ken, a friend of hers who is a private investigator, to seek his assistance. Afterwards, he visits his former residence to retrieve the magazine, only to run into his ex-wife and Ted en route to a romantic outing. Therefore, he opts to return home instead. Upon meeting Kinnear, he is reassured that the location has already been checked and that he does not need to be concerned. When the investigator wants to know if anyone else saw Shooter, Maud recalls that Greenleaf was in the woods talking to him when he passed by. Mort steps outside to smoke when Ken departs, and then Shooter materializes out of nowhere. He then requests that Mort publish the revised version of The Secret Window with his name on it, changing the ending to reflect his manuscript. Shooter makes threats to harm his ex-wife in response to his refusal. Mort swings at the man with a shovel in an angry outburst, but the shooter stops him just in time. Mort should present evidence in the magazine, he says. Mort realized he had forgotten to connect the phone line when he plugged it in, and he couldn't sleep that night. His ex-wife Amy's anxious voice comes on the other end of the line. There was fire damage to the house, she says. The fire chief informed them that arson was the cause of the incident. Someone set fire to their home on purpose. In response to the officer's question about potential enemies, Mort reveals that he has a grudge against the insurance office. Mort becomes enraged with Ted because Ted is interfering with their unresolved divorce and property issues. Ted tells him to stop upsetting Amy and to get his divorce settled already as they stand outside. Quinn calls Maud when she gets to her house and tells her that Mort's agent is sending him a copy of the magazine. In his account, Quinn met with Greenleaf, but he denied ever seeing Mort and Shutter in a joint appearance. He thinks Shutter might have threatened him. Additionally, Ken thinks that whoever hired the shooter hates Maud. Along with Ted, Maud's mind goes straight to him. When Quinn presses Maud for more evidence that he crossed paths with Shutter, Maud reveals that he bears bruises on his arms, a result of Shutter's violent grab. As evidence, the investigator requests that he bring both the manuscript and his bruises. In order to clarify the matter, they will rendezvous with Greenleaf at the cafe the following morning. Moore is still having trouble sleeping, so he is up late for their appointment. He finds a gunshot wound to the head outside and carries it as further evidence. He returns to the spot where they were supposed to meet, but neither King nor Greenleaf were there. Upon meeting Mort, Ted adamantly asserts his signature on the divorce papers. Maud, though, refuses, believing the assassin's on his payroll. Did it more often. Upon his return home, Shutter calls Maud and arranges for them to meet in the woods. He finds the bodies of King and Greenleaf when he gets there. When the terror gets the best of Maud, she blacks out. He finds Shutter when he wakes up. Thus, he endeavors to escape, but his legs remain feeble. Maud claims he will report it to the authorities. The axe and screwdriver that were used to murder them belong to him, according to Shutter, so he would be the one to face the consequences of the crime. The man gives him 2 hours to retrieve the magazine and cautions him against approaching the police in the future, threatening to harm him and anyone else he cares about out of fear of being held responsible for their deaths. Moore causes the vehicle to plummet to the bottom of a cliff as he shoves it with their bodies inside. Their marriage was already in trouble when Amy later called Maud. It all began when they lost their baby, and Maud's mental distance from her persisted even before the affair. It was supposed to be Ted and her who told him, but Amy lacked the guts to do it. Moore slams the phone in anger after she calls to remind him to sign the divorce papers. Amy has made up her mind to finally resolve the divorce by confronting Maud. Although Ted is eager to accompany her, she declines, claiming that Maud might become even more enraged at the mere sight of him. In order to retrieve the magazine, Maud makes her way to the post office. The sheriff spots him as he's about to open it, so he quickly gets in his car and drives away. On his return to the house, he discovers that someone has opened the package. The mystery magazine is given to him. The story he wrote and published, Secret Window, is there. However, the page is already cut off when he goes to it. He ponders how Shutter could have accomplished the task while he had the package in his possession. Throughout this entire period, but proceeds to disregard it. Still thinking about it, he shot his head and put it on. In an effort to make sense of everything, he begins to converse with himself. Maud claims he got bruises, but when he checks, he finds none. This makes him question whether Shutter actually existed. His delusional self is trying to warn him that he poses a real threat, bringing up the memory of his near shooting of his wife and Ted at the motel. Aside from that, he informs Maud that Shutter is an invention of his. Moore hurls an ashtray against the wall in a fit of frustration. Moore simply fabricated him, as Shutter discloses in a subsequent appearance. It was that morning that he met Ken and Greenleaf, and he also brought up the incident where he used a Molotov to set fire to Amy's house. It was something that Greenleaf distinctly recalls seeing Maud in the woods by herself. He is seen carrying the axe and screwdriver that he used to kill them, and Moore tells him to pull over. Moore has come to terms with the fact that he created Shooter to rectify the Secret Window's ending. After the protagonist murders his wife, according to Shooter, the story ends. The cabin is in utter disarray when Amy gets there later. There are carvings of Shooter's name all over the house and on the table, and she also discovers his manuscript. Maud is hiding behind the door, and she is startled to see the word Shooter, the source of the name, written behind him. Now that he sounds like a gun, he tells Amy that Maud has died. Moore seizes Amy as she tries to flee, and he uses the screwdriver to stab her leg. Maud prevents her from escaping by kicking her until she falls to the ground, where she hits her skull on a nearby rock. He's nearly going to murder her. But before that, he was a driver. Maud murders him by striking him with the shovel as she recites the final words of his latest manuscript. Maud puts an end to his ex-wife's life. The sheriff returns to his cabin 1 month later and discovers an abundance of maize in the kitchen. The writer summons the sheriff to come upstairs as he searches for Maud. After what he did, He warns Maud. The sheriff remains optimistic that they will discover the bodies necessary to apprehend him, even though they do not yet have sufficient evidence. Moore continues to eat his corn regardless of his warning. Additionally, it is implied in his narration that he interred the remains on the very ground where he had grown his crops. If you would like to receive updates on new movie recaps, please subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Press the alert bell